There are three ways to add a new name record in Denari. The quickest and most direct is by simply clicking the plus sign at the top of the page and then click New Name. Since the plus sign is always visible wherever you are in Denari, this method will probably be your go-to method for adding new names. This brings us to the Adding New Name screen, and most of this is pretty self-explanatory. Just enter the name and address information. However, let's take a few minutes to discuss a few of the fields. First is the organization field, and let's look at how it works with the first and last name fields. When Denari prints statements like receipts, pledge statements, end-of-year tax statements, etc., it merges the name and address into the address block on the statement. That address block has functionality built in that is designed to make the block more attractive and readable. The address block function uses a field called contact name, and it's found over on the main name screen. When you add this new name record, Denari will automatically populate the contact name field with the first, spouse, and last names that you enter here. You can then change that field so that the name is printed the way you prefer it to be seen in the address block on statements. It might say something by default like John and Jane Doe. Some Denari users, however, prefer a more formal format like Mr. and Mrs. Doe. You can put that into the contact name field, and that's what Denari will use in the address block. So what does that have to do with the organization field? Here's how the address block functionality works. If the organization field is blank, Denari will put the contact name in row 1 of the address block, the street address in row 2. If there is a street 2, it goes into row 3, and the city, state, and zip in row 3 or 4, depending on the contents of the street 2 line. And then, if there's a country, it will go in row 4 or 5. If there is something in the organization field, Denari will put the organization field in row 1, the contact name in row 2, the address in row 3, and the city, state, and zip in row 4. This can create a small problem, however. If you put the name of an organization in the organization field and also again in the contact name field, it will appear twice in the address block. So you should decide early on how to handle this for your organization. If you decide to store the name of the organization in the organization field, then you should leave the contact name field blank unless there's a person who is the contact for that organization that can go in that field. There's one small issue with this method, and that is when you create a new name record and leave the first and last name fields blank, Denari will not fill in the salutation field automatically. You will need to manually do that later on once the record is set up. The second field to discuss is the appeal code. It is a required field, and it tracks where this name record came from. In other words, which of your fundraising functions generated this new name. It uses your list of appeal codes, and if you've watched the video on that subject, you know that appeal codes represent your fundraising events or methods. This field does not track the donor's gifts and where they came from, only the event that initially brought this person to your data. If the donor makes donations in the future, those gifts will have their own appeal codes, which may be totally different from the appeal code here. Let's move down to the introduction date field. You can make this date any date that you want. It allows you to get a list of names that were added to your data in some date range. You could, for example, send a letter to welcome all new names that were added in the last month, and you could use this date to produce that list. Let me stop here and enter a name. The next step is to standardize the new name, and you do that by clicking the standardize link. Denari then compares the name information with the post office database and changes it to match if needed. The reason you standardize now is for the next step, and that next step is to click the Check for Dupes and Save button. At this point, Denari is going to compare the standardized information you entered here with the standardized name records already in Denari. And by default, it looks at the last name field, the street address, and the zip code. If it finds a match in all three of those, it will flag the record as a possible duplicate and will pop up a little window that shows you the existing name record as it has done here. You can then make a decision about whether the new record is really a duplicate or not. If the new record is a duplicate, you can click this link to go to the existing record. If it is not a duplicate, you can click the Save and Create a Dupe button here in the action bar to add the new record, and Denari will then bring you to the full name screen. And this screen is covered in more detail in the video on name list management. I'm going to go ahead and click on the one that's already here, but as we finish this process, as I said, Denari will bring us to this main screen. Your next step then is to review the contact name and salutation fields here to be sure that they're entered the way you want. You will also want to properly code the new name if needed, and you can learn more about codes in that video. Now I'd like to back up a little and talk about duplicates. They are the curse of any database. On the surface, it seems like it would be easy to simply find the matches and prevent or eliminate them. However, there are so many variables involved that there is simply no perfect criteria that will catch all of the duplicates. For example, if someone enters the street address in a name record as 123 Green Street and spells Green Green, and the next person enters it as 123 Green Street spelling or misspelling the word Green Gren, Denari will not see that as a match. Or you may have a situation where a husband and wife want two separate name records. They have the same last name, same street, and same zip, but they're not duplicates. Frequently, a child living with the parents who are already donors could make a donation on their own. Again, same last name, same street, and zip, but not a duplicate. And there are lots of other examples as well. The dupe check is not a perfect process. You can change the criteria that Denari uses to check for duplicates by going to the gear icon and then Setup. This is covered in more detail in a separate video, but simply if you check a box here, Denari will no longer use the default criteria and will use these combinations. There is an OR operator between these. For example, if you check the email box and then also check the phone box, Denari will flag the record as a potential duplicate if either the email matches or the phone matches, either one. So you can try out different combinations here to see what you think works best for you. The second way we can add a new name record is from the names screen. So if we go to the names link here and then name list management, we have an add new button, and that's going to take us to that same add name screen. And then finally, the third way is from the name screen itself. And so here we have the plus sign, and again that will take us back to that same screen. This concludes this video. If you have any questions about this topic, please contact our tech support office by clicking the help button and then support.